The dollar in Nora Ellison's coat pocket was the last one she had, and she knew it the way you know a sore tooth, by touching it again and again to be sure the ache was real. One bill, folded into a soft square, gone limp from a day of being checked. 11 hours on her feet at the Larkspur, 2 tables that walked out on their checks, and a manager who had waited until the dining room emptied to tell her that her shifts were being cut to 2 a week. Not fired, just thinned, the way you thin a plant you have decided not to keep. So she stood under the steel ribs of the Carver Street rail platform, with rain coming down sideways, and $1 between her and the end of the month. And she told herself it was fine. It was the kind of fine you say out loud so your mouth will believe it. The platform was almost empty. A man in a wet suit jacket reading something on his phone. A woman asleep sitting up. The arrival board ticking the 9:42 to 14 minutes late in that small green font that always seemed to be apologizing. The cold smelled like iron and rain and the burnt sugar steam from the kiosk at the far end, where a vendor was packing his cart for the night, folding down the awning, the smell of cocoa and roasted nuts thinning out into the dark. And then, under the bench across the platform, Nora heard a child crying. Not the loud kind. That was the thing that turned her around. It was the quiet kind. The kind a child learns when crying loud has stopped working. A small, steady, leaking sound with hiccups in it. The sound of someone who has decided no one is coming. A little girl sat on the cold concrete, with her knees up and her arms wrapped around them, maybe 5 years old, in a velvet party dress the color of plums, and no coat at all. Patent shoes with the buckles, a satin ribbon coming loose from her hair. She was soaked through and shaking, and she had her face pressed against her own knees so that the crying came out muffled, like she was trying to keep it for herself. Nora looked left, looked right. No adult moving toward the child. No one even looking. She crossed the platform. "Hey," Nora said, and crouched down a few feet away, far enough to be safe, low enough to be small. "Hey, that's a lot of rain for a person to be out in." The girl lifted her head. Her face was blotched and her eyes were huge and wet, and she looked at Nora the way lost children look at strangers, hope and terror braided so tight you can't pull one out without the other. "I'm not supposed to talk to people," the girl said. Her voice was thin and exact. "But I don't know where Mrs. Pruitt went." "Who's Mrs. Pruitt?" "She takes me. She was here." The girl's chin crumpled. "She told me to wait, and she went to find the man with the tickets. And the train came, and she wasn't back. And the doors closed, and I didn't get on because she said wait. So I waited. And then it was just me." The whole thing came out in one breath, a confession, a defense. "I waited where she said. I did the right thing." "You did exactly the right thing," Nora said, and meant it so hard her voice nearly went. "Staying put is the smartest thing a person can do when they're lost. Most grown-ups don't even know that." The girl studied her, weighing this. "Are you a grown-up?" "Last I checked. Some days it's hard to tell." Nora eased down to sit on the wet concrete, because a person sitting is less frightening than a person crouched and ready to spring. The cold of it went straight through her work pants. "I'm Nora. What's your name?" "Lily." A pause. "Lily Vance." She said the last name carefully, the way she'd clearly been taught to, like it was important, like it was a password. "Okay, Lily Vance. You're shaking like a leaf. We have got to do something about that before you turn into a popsicle." Nora glanced down the platform. The vendor had nearly finished closing. "You hungry?" Lily hesitated, and then she nodded, and the nod undid Nora completely, because it was the nod of a child who had decided that asking for things was dangerous. "Come on then." Nora stood and put out her hand, and after a long moment Lily took it, her fingers freezing and small, and they walked together to the kiosk, where the vendor was pulling down the last of the shutter. "We closed, sorry," the man said. Not unkind, just tired. "One cocoa," Nora said. "Please, the little one's frozen." He looked at Lily, at the dress, at the no coat, and something in his face softened. $2. And here was the math of Nora's life, performed in public on a rain-loud platform. $1 in her pocket, $2 for the cocoa, and a child shaking in a party dress. She thought of the bus fare she'd need tomorrow. She thought of the fact that she had not, herself, eaten since a piece of toast at 6 in the morning. She thought about all of it in the space of 1 second. The way you think about the cliff edge in the second before you decide you are not the kind of person who steps back. "I've got $1, Nora said, and laid it on the steel counter, soft and folded and warm from her pocket. "Can you do $1? The vendor looked at the bill. Then he looked at her coat, which was not a warm coat, and her shoes, which were the shoes of someone who stood all day. And he understood the entire situation, the way people who have stood all day understand each other. He pushed the dollar back 2 inches with one finger. "On the house," he said, "for the kid." And he made the cocoa anyway, hot and too sweet. And he found a slightly bent chocolate bar in the bottom of the cart, and gave that too. And he put a paper napkin over the top of the cup, so the rain wouldn't get in. And Nora pressed the dollar into his hand and said, "Thank you. Take it, please." And he took it, the way you take a gift you don't want to take, to let the giver keep their dignity. So that was the dollar, spent and refused, and spent again. A dollar that went around in a small circle on a cold platform, and ended up exactly where it started, in the hand of the man closing the kiosk, having bought nothing and everything. Nora wrapped her own scarf around Lily, who was now drinking cocoa with both hands and getting it on her nose, and she sat the girl on the dry bench under the awning and crouched in front of her and said, "Okay, now, we're going to find Mrs. Pruitt, or we're going to find a police officer, which is a person whose whole job is helping lost people, so they're basically the good guys. Either way, you are not going to be by yourself. That part's done, okay?" "Okay," Lily said, around the cocoa. And then, in the bottomless way of small children, "You smell like pancakes." "That's the syrup at my job. It gets into your clothes. Some people pay extra to smell like pancakes." "Do they?" "No, I made that up." And Lily laughed, a wet, wobbling laugh that turned into a hiccup. And for 1 second on that miserable platform, something was, against all available evidence, all right. Which was, of course, the exact moment the man came running. He came up the platform stairs 2 at a time, with his coat open and his tie gone, and his face the particular grey of a person living through the worst minutes of their life. He was tall and dark-haired, and expensively dressed in the way that had stopped meaning anything to him hours ago, and his eyes were going everywhere at once. The bench, the board, the kiosk, the dark. And when they landed on Lily, they did not fill with relief. They filled with terror, and then, faster than thought, with rage. Lily. He crossed the distance in 4 strides and dropped to his knees and got his hands on her shoulders, her arms, her face, checking her the way you check. And then he turned to Nora, still crouched there in her thin coat, and his voice came out shaking and cold and terrible. "Get away from her. Get away from my daughter right now." "Sir, who are you? What were you?" He could not finish it. The thing he was imagining was too large to say in front of the child. He pulled Lily against his chest and stood, putting his body between Nora and the girl, and to Nora, kneeling on the wet concrete with her scarf around someone else's daughter. The world rearranged itself into its usual shape. Of course. Of course this was how it would go. "Daddy, no," Lily said, twisting in his arms. "She gave me cocoa, my dollar lady. She stayed with me." But he wasn't hearing the words. He was only hearing his own pulse. And Nora knew that feeling, the white roar of it. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. which was to make herself small and slow and clear.
"My name is Nora Anderson,"
she said, staying down, hands visible, voice even. "I work at the Larkspur on 8th. I found your daughter alone under that bench about 10 minutes ago. She told me a woman named Mrs. Pruitt left her to find a conductor and didn't come back, and a train came, and your daughter stayed put, because that was what she was told to do, which is the smartest thing she could have done. She was freezing. I bought her a cocoa." Nora did not say, "with my last dollar." That was not his to know, and it would have sounded like a bid, and she had standards even at the bottom. "I was going to find an officer. That's all of it. That's everything that happened." The man stood there, breathing. Lily's small hand had found the collar of his coat and was holding on. Slowly, slowly, the grey drained out of his face and left behind something rawer, the look of a man who has just understood that he ran at the wrong person.
"There's a woman named Pruitt," he said, more to himself than to her.
There was supposed to be a car. The new agency. They said... He stopped. He looked at the scarf around his daughter, which was Nora's scarf, grey wool, going to holes at one corner. He looked at the cocoa. He looked at Nora's coat. And he had the grace, at least, to look ashamed. "I apologize," he said, stiffly, like a word in a language he'd studied but never had to speak. "I thought, when I saw her with... I thought the worst thing. I apologize." "You don't have to explain being scared about your kid," Nora said, and got to her feet, her knees printed white with cold. "I'd have run too." She picked up the empty cocoa cup, because she was the kind of person who picked up after herself, even at the lowest moment of her month. And she looked for a trash can. And that small, ordinary act, more than anything she'd said, seemed to land on him. "Let me..." He reached into his coat, and she saw the wallet, and she felt the whole night curdle. "No," she said. He stopped. "I don't want your money," Nora said. "I wanted her to not be cold. She's not cold anymore. We're square." She wound her watchless wrist into her sleeve and nodded at Lily. "Bye, Lily Vance. You did everything right tonight, remember that. Everything right." "Bye, dollar lady," Lily said. And Nora walked back out into the rain toward the long, wet walk home, because there was no dollar now for the bus, and she did not look back, and so she did not see the man standing on the platform with his daughter in his arms, and his wallet still half out of his coat, watching her go, and not understanding, yet, why it felt like the most important thing that had happened to him in 2 years had just walked off into the dark, in a coat too thin for the weather. His name was Julian Vance. He owned, among other things, the building 3 blocks from the platform with his name on it, and a holding company that owned other companies, and a penthouse with 11 rooms in it that he moved through like a man pacing a hotel he could not check out of. He had a board, and a mother, and a daughter. Out of all of them, the only one who could make him feel like a person was the one currently asleep against his shoulder in a borrowed scarf. He could have bought everyone on that platform a coat. He could have bought the platform. And a woman with $1 had given his daughter the only thing he hadn't known how to give her himself, which was the simple animal comfort of someone choosing to stay. And she had refused to be paid for it. And Julian Vance, who understood the price of everything, drove home that night, unable to stop turning over the one transaction in his life he could not square. He had the scarf cleaned. That was the first thing. He didn't know why, except that it was grey and going to holes, and it had been around his daughter's neck, and he could not bring himself to throw it away, and he could not bring himself to keep it dirty. So he had it cleaned and folded and set on the hall table. It sat there for 3 days, looking like a rebuke. Lily talked about the dollar lady constantly. "She sat down on the ground," Lily reported at breakfast, with the wonder of a scientist reporting a new law of physics. "Grown-ups don't sit on the ground. And she said staying put was smart. And she made up that people pay to smell like pancakes, which is a joke. That's a joke she made. And I knew it was a joke.
That's very good, said Delphine, the house manager, setting down the toast. Delphine had run the Vance household for 9 years, had buried one Vance and helped raise this one, and possessed the particular dryness of a woman who has seen a great deal of money fail to solve a great many problems.
And what did your father do when he found you?
He yelled at her,
Lily said cheerfully. Delphine looked at Julian over the coffee. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Delphine could deliver an entire sermon by lifting the lid off a teapot. I made a mistake, Julian said to his daughter and to his house manager, and mostly to himself.
You could fix it, Lily said. You always say, if you make a mistake, you fix it. You say it to me.
There are sentences your child hands you that go in under the ribs. Julian set down his cup. I don't know her last name, he said, and then remembered that he did, that she had given it to him on the platform with her hands visible like a woman trying not to frighten a frightened man. Ellison. Nora Ellison.
She worked at the Larkspur on 8th.
You could go to her work, Lily said, and say sorry, and bring her a present.
It's a little more complicated than that, Julian said.
Why?
Said Lily, and Delphine, lifting the teapot, said,
Yes, Julian. Why?
So that was how Julian Vance came to walk into the Larkspur on 8th, on a Tuesday, at the lunch rush, in a suit that cost more than the restaurant's monthly lease, to apologize to a waitress. The Larkspur was a good bistro that had been a great bistro 10 years ago, and was now mostly running on the fumes of its old reputation. White tablecloths gone soft with washing, a wine list nobody updated, a clientele that skewed toward people who remembered it being better. Nora was 3 tables deep and rising, a tray balanced on her flat hand, when she saw him come in and felt the floor tilt. He saw her at the same moment. He had been rehearsing something in the car. All of it left him.
Table for 1, said the host, a kid named Devon, who did not know who Julian was and would not have cared. I'm here to see... Julian nodded across the room. Her. Devon looked at Nora, looked back at the suit, made the entirely reasonable assumption. Sir, our staff are working. If there's a complaint... It's not a complaint, Julian said. And the words came out wrong, too clipped, the boardroom voice, the only voice he had for strangers. I need to speak with Ms. Ellison. Nora delivered her tray, set down 4 plates in the right order, told table 6 the special was the lamb, and crossed to him with her chin up and her order pad still in her hand, because it gave her hands something to do. You found my work, she said. You told me where it was. I did, didn't I? She had not slept well in 3 days, for reasons unrelated to him and now suddenly related to him. I'm working, Mr.
Vance. Julian Vance. He said it the way Lily had said her last name on the platform, like it ought to mean something, and then heard himself and looked, for 1 second, almost human. I came to apologize. Properly. Not on a train platform in a... He gestured at the rain still coming down outside. In a crisis. I accused you of something monstrous. You had done the opposite of a monstrous thing. I was wrong, and I was unkind about it. And I'm sorry. Around them the lunch rush clattered on. A busser dropped a fork. Somewhere a phone rang 4 times and stopped. The smell of seared lamb and old wine hung in the warm air, and a draft slid in under the door each time it opened, cold against Nora's ankles. She was aware of every plate she still had to clear, every check she still had to run, and underneath all of it, she was aware of the strange fact of this man standing in her dining room in the daylight, looking smaller than he had on the platform, as if the rain had washed some of the height out of him. She had spent 3 nights telling herself the platform was a closed door. Doors, it turned out, did not always stay where you left them. Okay, Nora said. He waited. There was clearly supposed to be more. "That's it," he said. "You said sorry. I heard it. We're square." She tucked the pad into her apron. "You really came all the way down here for that?" "I also came," Julian said. And now he hesitated, because this was the part that had no script. "Because my daughter has talked about you without stopping for 3 days. She calls you the Dollar Lady. She told me you said she did everything right. She has not." He stopped, recalibrated to something he could afford to say. "She's had a hard couple of years. She doesn't take to people. She took to you in 11 minutes on a freezing platform. And I would like to understand why, and I can't, so I'm here making a fool of myself in your dining room. That's the truth of it." It was, Nora would think later, the first true thing he'd said, and it surprised them both. "Order something," she said. "You're taking up a table." He ordered the lamb. He ate it alone in the corner, watching her work. The economy of her. The way she carried 4 plates and 3 conversations and never once let a table feel rushed or forgotten. The way she crouched. There it was again, that crouch. To talk to a toddler at table 9, whose family was clearly counting every dollar, and made the kid laugh, and somehow got an extra roll onto the table without it appearing on the check. He watched a woman who had told him she didn't want his money give away things she didn't have all afternoon. He left a tip that was too large, because he didn't know how else to say what he meant, and she chased him out into the rain to give half of it back, and they stood under the larkspur's torn awning, arguing about money, in a way that was not, underneath, about money at all. "This is insulting," Nora said, holding out the bills. "It's a tip, for service. It's how the transaction works." "You tipped me 300%. That's not a tip, that's a—" She searched for it. "That's a guilty conscience with a decimal point." And Julian Vance, who had not laughed out loud in longer than he could remember, made a sound that surprised him on its way out. "Keep 40, he said. "Standard 20 for the lamb, and 20 because I sat at your table for 2 hours and watched you work, which is a thing people pay consultants a great deal for. Keep 40, and I'll go." She kept 40. He went. And both of them spent the rest of the day pretending the conversation had ended there. Nora folded the 220s into the same coat pocket where the last dollar had lived, and the weight of them felt wrong, like change handed back from a debt she hadn't agreed to owe. Julian drove the 3 blocks to his building and sat in the car in the underground dark for a full minute before he went up, replaying the way she had said, "guilty conscience" with a decimal point, turning it over the way he turned over a clause that had more teeth than it first appeared. He had come to close an account. He had left it more open than before, and the discomfort of that, for a man who balanced everything, sat in him all the way up the elevator. It had not, of course, because 11 days later, the new nanny quit. This was the part Nora would not learn the shape of for a long time. But Lily had been on the platform that night because her grandmother had decided the old nanny, a soft Irish woman named Bridget, whom Lily adored, was not the right sort of influence, and had dismissed her with 2 weeks' pay and replaced her with the Pruitt woman from a proper agency, and that Lily, who had not been consulted, had been quietly, methodically miserable, and that on the night in question, Lily had bolted from the Pruitt woman at the station, not because she was a careless child, but because she had heard that Bridget sometimes took the Carver Street line home, and she had thought, with the terrible logic of a 5-year-old, that if she could just get to the platform she might find her. Julian had not known any of that yet, either. He knew only that the Pruitt woman was gone, and the agency was sending no one acceptable, and his mother was floating names of suitable young women who could manage the household and the child with an enthusiasm that made his skin crawl, and that his daughter, asked what she wanted, had said one thing, the same thing, over and over. "I want the dollar lady." "Lily, she has a job." "She could have a different job, with us." "That's not how—" "You said," Lily reminded him,
with the merciless consistency of the young, that if you want something, you should ask for it nicely and be willing to hear no. So, Julian Vance, for the second time in a month, did a thing entirely outside his nature.
He went back to the Larkspur, and he waited until the end of Nora's shift this time, and he stood in the cold with 2 coffees, because he had noticed she was always cold. And when she came out, tying her hood, he handed her one and said, before she could refuse it, "I have a proposition, and I need you to hear all of it before you say no, because you are going to want to say no immediately, and you might be right to. But I'd like you to be right to for the actual reasons, and not the ones you've already decided on." Nora took the coffee. It was a good coffee. She hated how much she noticed that. "I'm listening," she said, and he told her that Lily needed someone in the afternoons, 3 days a week, school pickup and dinner, and the long, fragile hours before bed. That the household would pay well, better than the Larkspur, better than 2 Larkspurs. That it would not be domestic work. There was a full staff for that. It would be specifically and only the thing she had done on the platform, which was to be a steady person who chose to stay. That she could keep her hours at the restaurant. He wasn't asking her to give up her life. He was asking her to spend 3 afternoons inside his daughters. And that he understood completely if the answer was no, but that he had a 5-year-old who had asked for exactly one thing in 2 years. And he was not too proud to come stand in the cold and ask on her behalf. The rain had thinned to a mist. The coffee was warm through Nora's gloves. "Why me?" she said. "You don't know me. I could be anyone." "I had you looked into," Julian said, and had the decency to wince at himself. "I'm sorry, I run a company, it's a reflex. I'm trying to be honest with you about it instead of pretending I didn't. You aged out of the county foster system at 18. You put yourself through 2 years of nursing school before you ran out of money. You have never been arrested. You donate plasma like clockwork. And your landlord, when my office called pretending to be a reference, said you'd talked the woman across the hall out of being evicted by negotiating with the management company on her behalf, for free, on your day off." He paused. "I don't need you to be anyone. I need you to be exactly who you already are, 3 afternoons a week." Nora stood in the mist, holding a coffee that was too good, in front of a man who had read her whole thin file. And she understood that she should be furious about the looking into. And she was, a little. But underneath the fury was something she had not felt in a very long time, which was the sensation of being seen and not found wanting. 2 afternoons, she said. "I keep my Larkspur shifts, and the first time anyone in your house treats me like the help, I walk, and you eat the notice." "Done," Julian said, too fast. "And I'm not your employee at the platform level," Nora said. Not entirely sure what she meant, but sure that she meant it. "When I'm with her, she's mine. You don't override me in front of her. We disagree. We do it in the kitchen, like grown-ups." Julian Vance looked at this woman in her thin coat, setting terms in a parking lot, and felt the strangest sensation. Like a window opening in a house he'd thought was sealed. "Done," he said again. And that was how Nora Ellison came to spend 2 afternoons a week, and then 3, and then most of them, in the 11 cold rooms of the Vance penthouse, teaching a billionaire's daughter how to make pancakes, and teaching a billionaire, without either of them noticing it was happening, how to come home. The penthouse was beautiful, and it was freezing. Not in temperature. Delphine kept it at a precise 71 degrees. It was freezing in the way of houses where no one has laughed in a while. All that glass and pale stone, and a view of the whole city that nobody looked at. Art on the walls, chosen by a consultant. A kitchen with 2 ovens that had clearly never made anything but reservations. Lily's room was the only one that looked lived in, and even that had the slightly staged quality of a room a designer had imagined a happy child might want. Nora changed things slowly. She was careful about it, because it wasn't her house, but she could not help herself. She was a person who made places warmer, the way some people can't help straightening a crooked picture. The first afternoon, she found the kitchen had no flour. A kitchen with 2 ovens and a marble island the size of a small boat and no flour in it, because no one in this house had ever needed flour, because flour is for people who make things by hand for people they love. She sent Delphine's nephew to the store with a list, and by the second week, the kitchen smelled, on Nora afternoons, like vanilla and warm butter. And Lily had a stool with her name on it, and there was a drawing taped to one of the 2 ovens that no consultant had approved. "You're getting flour on the calicata," Delphine observed, the first time, meaning the marble. "I'll clean it," Nora said. "Oh, I'm not complaining," Delphine said, and lifted the lid off a pot to check it, which was the closest Delphine came to displaying emotion. "It's the first interesting thing that's happened to that counter since it was installed. The man who installed it cried, you know, said it was the most beautiful slab he'd ever cut. Then he left and no one ever put anything on it but takeout." She set the lid back down. "Get all the flour on it you like." Julian came home those first weeks, at the hour he always came home, which was late, and the house was usually quiet by then. Lily down, Nora gone. But he started, without admitting it to himself, leaving earlier. A meeting moved, a call taken from the car, and one Thursday he came in at 7, and the whole apartment smelled like cinnamon, and there was a child's laugh coming from the kitchen. An actual laugh, his daughter's. A sound he realized he had not heard inside these walls since before. And he stood in his own front hall in his coat and could not make himself go in. Because going in would mean being seen wanting it. And he was a man who had built his entire life on never being seen wanting anything. "You can come in," Nora called, without turning around. "We made too many. It's a math problem now. You'd be helping." So he came in. He stood at the edge of his own kitchen, in his $1,000 shoes, while his daughter, flour to the elbows, narrated the construction of a cinnamon roll with the gravity of an engineer. And Nora handed him a mug of coffee he hadn't asked for, and a roll on a napkin, and said, "Sit. You're allowed to sit in your own kitchen. It's not a board meeting." And he sat, and he ate the roll, and it was the best thing he had eaten in 2 years, and not because of the roll. This is the part that has no drama in it, and is the most important part. For 3 weeks, nothing happened, in the way that the most important things are nothing happening. Lily learned to crack an egg one-handed and was insufferable about it. Julian learned that if he came home by 7, there would be a plate, and that the plate was not really about the food. Nora learned the geography of the cold rooms and warmed them one at a time. She found, in a drawer in the study, she had no business being in except that Lily had run in there to show her something, a photograph turned face down, and she did not turn it over, because some doors are not yours to open. But she understood from the way it was lying there, face down in a drawer that still opened easily, that someone in this house was grieving with the lights off. "Her mother," Delphine said later, when Nora asked nothing and Delphine answered anyway, the way she did. "Eleanor. 2 years this past autumn, she was—" Delphine paused, choosing, which Delphine never did. "She was the warm one. She was the reason this house used to have flour in it. He's been holding his breath ever since. And that little girl has been holding hers because she watches him do it." Nora thought about Lily on the platform, choosing to sit and wait because waiting was what she'd been told to do. Holding still in the cold, rather than risk doing the wrong thing. "He thinks if he doesn't feel it, it can't take anything else from him," Nora said. It came out before she'd decided to say it. Delphine looked at her with something that was almost respect. "Don't fall in love with him," Delphine said, not unkindly. "I've watched 3 suitable young women try. He's a fortress with a moat, and the moat has a moat. You're better than wasting yourself on a closed door." "I'm the help," Nora said lightly. "I make the pancakes. I'm not in the market for a fortress." Delphine lifted the lid off the pot, checked it, set it down. She said, which from Delphine was an entire essay, and went to lay the table. What Delphine had seen, and Nora had not yet admitted, was that the door was not as closed as advertised. It opened a little more each Thursday. It opened when Lily fell asleep on the sofa between them during a movie, and neither of them moved for an hour, talking low over the small, warm weight of her. It opened when Julian, who could discuss markets in 4 languages, confessed that he did not know how to braid hair and had been watching videos, and Nora taught him on a doll, his big, careful hands fumbling a French braid, while Lily supervised and corrected, and the 3 of them laughing at the lopsided result. It opened when he made, in the 6th week, his first joke. They were doing dishes. Nora washed, Julian dried, because she had handed him a towel one night and said, "You have arms," and he had been too startled to refuse, and now it was a thing they did, a small domestic machine. Lily was asleep. The city glittered, ignored through the wall of glass.
"I had a very important call today," Julian said, drying a plate with the seriousness of a man defusing a bomb. "With the man who owns a great deal of Singapore." "Mm-hmm. And the entire time, I was thinking about the fact that I do not know where the small spoons go." Nora paused, her hands in the suds. "That's the joke. I don't know where the small spoons go," Julian said. "In my own house. A man owns Singapore and asks my opinion, and I'm thinking, where do the small spoons live? I have lived here 4 years. I have never put away a spoon." He set down the plate. "It's not a very good joke." "It's a terrible joke," Nora said, and she was grinning. She couldn't stop it. "It's the worst joke I've ever heard. The small spoons live in the 2nd drawer, by the way." "I know," Julian said. "I looked. This morning. I looked so that I would know, so I could say it just now. I prepared a joke about not knowing where the spoons are by finding out where the spoons are." He looked genuinely distressed by his own process. "That's not how jokes work, is it?" And Nora laughed so hard she had to grip the edge of the sink, and Julian watched her laugh at his terrible prepared joke about spoons. And something in his chest that had been a fist for 2 years opened one finger. And that was the night the trouble really started. Because that was the night he understood that he was not, in fact, a fortress, and that the moat had been drained sometime in the last 6 weeks by a woman with flour on her hands, and that he was in a great deal of danger. He did the thing men like Julian do when they are in danger. He tried to make it a transaction again, to get it back onto ground he understood. He doubled Nora's pay without being asked. He had Delphine order her a coat, a good one, warm, charcoal wool, left in a box on the hall table. Nora left the box unopened on the table for 3 days, the way the scarf had once sat there. And then, on the 4th day, she put it, still boxed, on his desk in the study, with a note that said, "I told you, I'm not the help. The coat's beautiful. Buy it for someone who works for you. I'll keep coming for Lily." Julian read the note 4 times. Then he did something he had not done in 2 years. He took the face-down photograph out of the drawer and turned it over and looked at his wife's face, at Eleanor laughing in a kitchen that used to have flour in it, and he said, out loud, to no one, "I don't know how to do this." And the house, which kept all its secrets, kept that one too. The judgment came, as judgment does, from the place that called it concern. Vivian Vance was 71 years old and had buried a husband and a daughter-in-law, and had decided, somewhere in the wreckage, that the only safe way to love what remained was to control it. She loved her son. She loved her granddaughter with a fierceness that frightened her. And she had concluded, with the certainty of a woman who has never once been told no by anyone she could not fire, that the way to protect them was to arrange them, properly, into a shape the world could not damage. A waitress did not fit the shape. "I'm told," Vivian said, arriving unannounced on a Thursday, which was not a coincidence, settling into the cold living room like a verdict, "that the household help has been promoted." "Mother,"
Julian came in, still loosening his tie. "This is Nora. Nora, my mother, Vivian." "We've not met," Vivian said, in a tone that established this had been Nora's failing. She did not extend a hand. She looked at Nora the way a jeweler looks at a stone someone has claimed is real. "You're the young woman from the train." "I am." "How fortunate for us all that you happened to be there." There was an edge in it, fine and clean. Of course, one does wonder about young women who happen to be in the right place at the right time when there is a Vance involved. One has seen it before. The room went very quiet. In the kitchen, Lily had gone still over her homework. Nora had been spoken to like this her whole life, by social workers and landlords and managers and the mothers of children she'd babysat. The particular music of being reminded of your place by someone who has never had to think about theirs. She knew all the responses. The meek one, the angry one, the one where you let them win to keep the peace. She used none of them. "I happened to be there," Nora said evenly, "because the 9:42 was late and I couldn't afford a cab. So I was standing in the rain when your granddaughter started crying under a bench. I imagine the kind of young woman you're describing would have known to wait somewhere warmer for her billionaire to come along. I didn't know Lily was a Vance until she told me. I bought her a cocoa with the last money I had, and I'd have done it for any kid on any platform. And the proof of that, Mrs. Vance, is that I turned down your son's wallet twice before I ever set foot in this house." She picked up her tea. "I'm not the right place at the right time. I'm just the person who was there. You can check. He had me looked into. The file's thin, and it's clean." Vivian's expression did not change, which was how Nora knew the shot had landed. "You're not what I expected," Vivian allowed, after a moment, which, from her, was nearly a concession, and nearly a threat. "People rarely are," Nora said. "It's the nicest thing about people." In the kitchen, very quietly, Delphine lifted the lid off a pot, looked at nothing, and set it back down, which was Delphine applauding. Julian had said nothing during the entire exchange. This was the first crack, though no one named it then. He had stood in his own living room while his mother insulted a woman who had given his daughter the only warmth in this house, and he had said nothing. Because Vivienne was a force he had spent 40 years learning to survive by not opposing. And old survival is stronger than new courage. He told himself he'd let Nora handle it because she so clearly could. He told himself it was respect. Underneath, where he didn't look, was the truth. That he had been afraid, and that he had let her stand alone in the cold a second time. Nora noticed. She didn't say anything, but she noticed, the way you notice a hairline crack in a window, the small thought that goes, "I see. So that's how it is." The thought she had spent a lifetime learning to have about people before they could teach it to her the hard way. She went home that night in her thin coat, past the box with the good coat in it still sitting unopened, and she told herself it didn't matter. She was the pancake lady. She made the pancakes. She didn't need this man to fight her battles. And every word of that was true, and none of it stopped the small, cold thought from settling in for the winter. The pressure escalated the way pressure does, not all at once, but as weather. Vivian began to appear more often. A name came up at dinner, again and again. Camilla Ashworth, the daughter of an old family. Such a lovely girl, so good with children, such a suitable match. Each mention a small stone laid on a wall. Camilla herself materialized at a Sunday lunch Nora was not invited to, and heard about only because Lily reported it. "There was a lady," Lily said, building a tower of blocks with the focus of a foreman. "Grandmother's friend's daughter. She had shiny hair. She asked me what my favorite subject was, and I said recess, and she laughed, but not like it was funny, like she was supposed to laugh." Lily knocked the tower down. "She didn't know I take milk no foam. You know I take milk no foam." "I do know that," Nora said, around a sudden tightness she did not examine.
"She's going to be my new mom, maybe," Lily said, with the brutal casualness of a child reporting the weather. "Grandmother said. She said it to Daddy, and Daddy didn't say anything." Daddy didn't say anything. There it was again. "Lots of things get said that don't happen," Nora said, and rebuilt the tower, and changed the subject, and went home, and lay awake doing the math of her life, which now included a column she had not authorized, a column with a 5-year-old in it, who took milk no foam, and a man who didn't say anything, and a good coat in a box she would not let herself want. The night Nora saw the other side of Vivian Vance, she was not supposed to see it. It was the company's winter gala, an enormous thing, held in the atrium of the Vance building. 400 people, and an ice sculpture, and a string quartet. And Nora was there only because Lily had begged, and Julian had said yes, before he'd thought it through. So that Nora arrived in the one dress she owned that wasn't black and white work clothes, and stood at the edge of all that wealth, feeling exactly as out of place as everyone wanted her to feel, and minded it less than she'd expected, because she had Lily's hand in hers, and Lily's hand did not care about dresses. Vivian had withdrawn from the lights around 10. Nora, taking Lily to find a quieter room before the girl melted down from overstimulation, had opened the wrong door, a small private lounge off the main floor, and there was Vivian, alone, not knowing she was seen, sitting very straight on a small sofa with a champagne flute she wasn't drinking, looking at a framed photograph she had taken down from the wall and set on her knees. It was a photograph of a young woman, dark-haired, laughing. Eleanor. And Vivian, the fortress with the moat, was running one thumb across the glass, back and forth, slowly, the way you touch a thing you cannot have back. And her face, with no one watching, was not a verdict. It was just grief. Old and patient and enormous. The grief of a woman who had decided that the only way to keep from losing another daughter was to never let one in again. Nora stepped back, soundlessly, and drew the door shut, and took Lily the other way, and said nothing. Then, or later. But she carried it with her after that. The knowledge that the woman who had called her an opportunist in a cold living room was, underneath, just another person in this house holding her breath. It did not excuse the cruelty, but it explained the shape of it. And Nora had learned long ago that people who have been hurt build walls in the exact dimensions of their wound, and that the cruelest people are very often the most afraid. She did not know yet what she would do with that knowledge. She only filed it, the way she filed everything, and went back out into the lights to find a quiet corner for a tired child. Which was where the evening, having been merely uncomfortable, became a test. The catering for the gala had been contracted out, a large firm, and somewhere in the back of house, in the makeshift kitchen they'd built behind a wall of black drape, something had gone wrong. A warming unit failed, a timeline collapsed, and the head of the floor, a sleek man named Pryor, who worked for Vivian and ran her events, had decided the way to fix it was to find someone to scream at. Nora heard it before she saw it, the particular cadence of a powerful person flaying a powerless one, and her feet were already moving, because that sound was the sound of her whole working life, and she could no more walk past it than she could walk past a child crying under a bench. Behind the drape, a young server, 19 at most, was standing, white-faced and shaking, while Pryor told her, in a low, vicious voice so as not to disturb the guests, that she was finished, that she'd never work in this city again, that the failure of the warming unit was somehow, through a logic only humiliation understands, her personal fault. A dozen other catering staff stood frozen, watching, learning the lesson that was being taught for their benefit. "The units are on a single circuit," Nora said, walking in, and every head turned. She did not raise her voice. She'd spent 11 years learning that the calmest voice in a kitchen wins. If one tripped, they all tripped. That's not a person, that's a breaker. Where's your panel? Pryor turned on her. This woman in a cheap dress who did not belong back here. This is not your... Who are you?
I'm someone who's worked 100 service disasters, and I'm telling you, you're wasting 4 minutes screaming at a teenager when you could be resetting a breaker. Nora was already scanning the back wall. You've got 400 people and no hot food, and the longer you stand here proving you're in charge, the worse the only number that matters gets, which is the number of minutes those plates are late. So, panel. Something in the certainty of it cut through. A different server pointed. Nora found the panel, found the tripped breaker, reset it, and the warming units hummed back to life. And then she turned to the room of frozen staff and did the thing she actually knew how to do. The thing 11 years had built into her bones. She ran the service. Plate these first. The cold apps are fine. Send them now. Hold the entrees 90 seconds. You and you take the far side. Don't apologize to the tables. Confidence reads as competence. A late plate served like it was always coming on time is not a late plate. She moved through it like a conductor, and the catering staff, who had been about to fall apart, fell instead into the relief of being well led. And within 6 minutes, the floor was moving, and the guests never knew. And the 19-year-old, who'd been about to be destroyed, was carrying a tray with her chin up, because someone had stood between her and the man with the power. Nora did not know that Julian had come looking for her. She did not know that he was standing at the edge of the black drape, in his tuxedo, watching the woman who made his daughter pancakes take command of a collapsing kitchen full of strangers, and save the evening of 400 people who would never thank her. Watching her shield a teenager with her own body and her own voice. Watching her do, in a back of house no one would ever see, the same thing she had done on a platform in the rain, which was to stand between someone small and the cold. She did not know he was there until it was over, until the floor was running and she turned, breathing hard, a smear of someone else's sauce on her one good dress, and found him looking at her with an expression she had never seen on him, an expression with no fortress in it at all. "You're missing your own party," she said. "I found something better," Julian said. And Pryor, who had recovered enough to be furious, started to say something about who led the help back here, and Julian Vance turned to him with the full, cold weight of the man who signed everyone's checks and said, very quietly, "This is Miss Ellison. She just saved your job by doing it for you. You'll apologize to that young woman you were screaming at, by name, tonight, in front of her colleagues, or you'll be looking for work in the morning, and I'll be the reference." A pause. Frankly, Pryor, I'd start practicing the apology. It was the first time he had stood between Nora and the cold himself. She noticed that too. They did not talk about it that night, but something had shifted, and they both felt it on the long, quiet elevator ride up. Lily asleep against Nora's shoulder, the numbers ticking down, the two of them standing close in the small, bright box, with the whole evening still humming between them. Julian carried Lily to bed. Nora should have gone home. She didn't. She stood at the wall of glass, looking at the city she'd lived in her whole life, from a height she'd never seen it. And Julian came and stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. And neither of them said anything for a long time. "My mother was cruel to you," Julian said finally. "In my house. And I let her be." "Yes," Nora said. "You did." He absorbed that. He did not defend himself, which was new. "I've been a coward about her my whole life," he said. "It's the one thing I don't know how to. She's the only thing left from before. And I keep thinking if I don't fight her, I won't lose her too. And that's not." He stopped. "That's not an excuse. That's just the shape of it." "I know the shape of it," Nora said quietly. "I saw her tonight, with a picture of your wife." She felt him go still beside her. "I wasn't supposed to. I opened the wrong door. She didn't see me. She wasn't a verdict in there, Julian. She was just sad. As sad as you. You're both holding your breath in the same house and calling it different things."
Julian looked at her, this woman who had walked into his life with $1 and kept seeing the things he'd hidden even from himself. "How do you do that?" he said. "How do you just see people?" "I had a lot of practice being invisible," Nora said. "You learn to watch from down there." She turned from the glass. "I should go." "Stay," he said, and then heard it, and they both did. The size of the word. And he amended it, too late, into something smaller and safer. "For coffee. It's late. Stay for coffee." She stayed for coffee. The kitchen smelled of ground beans and the cinnamon that had long since soaked into the wood of the cabinets, and the radiator ticked somewhere low and steady, and the marble was cool under Nora's forearms where she leaned, and the coffee was very hot and very good, and she let herself, for once, simply notice that it was. They sat in the warm kitchen she had warmed, and they talked, really talked, about Eleanor, whom he had not spoken of in 2 years, about the foster homes, which Nora had not spoken of to anyone, about Lily, about the small spoons, about everything. The city outside slid slowly from black to slate to a thin pearl grey, the towers going from lit boxes to grey paper cutouts, and a single gull crossed the glass once, and neither of them moved to turn on the lamp, because the dark was doing them a kindness. When Nora finally left at dawn, nothing had happened, and everything had. And she walked home in her thin coat in the cold morning, with her ruined good dress over her arm, the smell of his coffee still on her hands, smiling like a fool, terrified. What followed was the happiest week of Nora Ellison's adult life, and she would not understand until later that this was the universe winding up to take it from her. It was a small, ordinary week. That was the wonder of it. The mornings came up cold and clean over the city, frost feathering the corners of the great glass wall, and the kitchen filled every evening with the ordinary, holy smells of a house being lived in: browning butter, toast, the green bite of herbs under a blade, coffee, and once, memorably, smoke when Julian forgot the eggs. The radiators ticked their small iron rhythm. Lily's drawings multiplied across the doors of both ovens like ivy. Somewhere in those 7 days, the penthouse stopped feeling like a hotel and started feeling like the inside of something warm. And none of the three of them said so out loud, because saying so out loud felt like the kind of thing that might break it. And they were right, though not in the way they feared. Julian came home early every night. He learned to make exactly one thing: scrambled eggs, badly, and made them for the three of them one Saturday morning with the gravity of a state occasion, and Lily declared them the worst eggs but the best breakfast, which became a thing they said, a private grammar. They took Lily to the aquarium, the three of them, and a woman at the jellyfish tank assumed they were a family and said, "Your daughter has your eyes," to Julian, meaning Nora's eyes, which were nothing like Lily's, and none of them corrected her. And Lily slipped her hand into Nora's in the blue dark, and the not correcting sat warm in Nora's chest for hours. The aquarium hummed around them, that low, filtered drone of 1,000 gallons of moving water, and the air smelled faintly of salt and chlorine, and the buttered popcorn from the lobby cart. Pale light wavered across all three of their faces, blue, and then silver, and then blue again, as the jellyfish passed past the glass, and Lily pressed her free palm flat to the cold tank and breathed a fog onto it. And Julian, without seeming to notice he was doing it, rested his hand briefly at the small of Nora's back to steer her gently out of a stroller's path, and took it away again too fast, and neither of them mentioned the warmth of it, or the way the warmth stayed. The inside joke had grown. The dollar had become shorthand between them, the thing that started it all. When something was a bargain, Julian would say, "That's a real dollar lady deal." When Lily did something brave, he'd say, "You did everything right." Nora's words from the platform, handed back. And one night, doing dishes, Julian dried a plate and said, carefully, not looking at her, "I think about what would have happened if the 9:42 had been on time. If you'd have made your train.
if I'd have come up those stairs to an empty bench. He set the plate down. I think about it more than is reasonable. Don't, Nora said, washing. The 9:42 is never on time. It's the one reliable thing in this city. I'm trying to say something, Julian said. I know, Nora said. I'm not ready to hear it. Give me a minute. I've been the help my whole life. I need a minute to believe a person could. She stopped, her hands in the suds. Just give me a minute. I'm not saying no. I'm saying I've never in my life gotten the thing, and I need a second to believe the thing might be real before you say it. Because if you say it and it isn't real, I don't think I survive it. Okay? Give me until the dishes are done. Okay, Julian said softly, and dried the next plate, and the next. And it was, Nora thought, the most romantic conversation of her life. Two people doing dishes and not saying it yet. The warm, small machine of them. The future, sitting on the counter like something almost cool enough to touch. The dishes were not done before the future broke. It broke on a Thursday, which was always the day everything happened in that house. And it broke through Vivian, who had spent the happy week not idle but at work, and who arrived not in cruelty this time, but in something worse. In love wielded as a weapon, in concern that had decided to save them all, whether they wanted saving or not. Nora arrived for her afternoon to find Vivian already there, and Julian home early, too early, and a stillness in the apartment that her body recognized before her mind did. The stillness of a room where a decision has been made. Ms. Ellison, Vivian said. Sit, please. We've been discussing the household. Where's Lily? With Delphine. This doesn't concern her. Everything in this house concerns her, Nora said. But she sat, because Julian wasn't looking at her, and that not looking was a language she spoke fluently. Vivian laid it out with the precision of a woman who had built her case for days. The arrangement, she said, had become irregular. The child had grown attached, dangerously attached, in a way that could only hurt her when the arrangement ended, as all arrangements ended. There was talk, she said, among people who mattered, about the nature of Ms. Ellison's role, talk that was beginning to touch the family's name, the company's reputation, talk of a billionaire and his daughter's caretaker, which was an old and ugly story that the world told whether or not it was true. For Lily's sake, Vivian said, and for Julian's, and even, she said, for Ms. Ellison's own sake, it was time to make things proper. A formal position, generously compensated, with a contract, with boundaries. Or a clean end, also generously compensated. But the in-between, this warm, dangerous in-between where a waitress did dishes with Avance and a child started calling her, it had to stop. It was not kind, Vivian said, to let a child love someone who could be let go. And then she named a number, a large number. A number to formalize, or a number to disappear. Nora's choice. But a number either way. Because everything in this family ended in a number. Nora's whole body had gone cold. But she was not looking at Vivian. She was looking at Julian. Julian, she said. He looked at the floor. He looked at his mother. He looked at anything but her. And then he said the words that ended it. And the terrible thing was that he said them gently, which made them worse, because gentleness meant he believed them. Maybe a formal arrangement it would protect you, Nora, from the talk. A real position, real terms, it's actually more respectful if you think about. He was offering her a contract. After the dishes. After, I think about it more than is reasonable. After the aquarium and the worst eggs and the dollar that meant everything, he was, under the first real pressure, reaching for the wallet, turning her back into a transaction, into the help with good terms, because that was the only shape he knew how to keep safe, the only way he knew to hold something
without the terror of having to lose it as a person. And Nora understood in one cold rush that she had been right all along. That she had been right to need a minute. That the thing was not real, or, if it was real, it was not real enough to survive his mother and his fear. The worst interpretation arrived fully formed, as the worst interpretations do. Maybe he had only ever seen her as staff with unusual range. Maybe the look at the gala had been gratitude, not love. Maybe the dollar had been, to him, a transaction too, a debt to be cleared. And this was the clearing of it, generously compensated. Maybe she had done the one thing she had promised herself at 18 she would never do, which was to mistake being useful for being loved. "You did everything right," Nora said quietly, and watched the words hit him. His own borrowed words, hers first, handed back broken. She stood up. Her legs held, which surprised her. "I'm not going to take a contract, Mrs. Vance. And I'm not going to take a check. And you can put away the number, because it was never about the number, which is the one thing your family will never understand." She looked at Julian one last time, and her voice did not shake, which she would be proud of for years. "I told you on the first day. The first time anyone in this house treats me like the help, I walk. I just didn't think it would be you who did it." She got her thin coat. She did not take the good coat in its box. It was still on the desk in the study, refused. And she left it there, which was its own small sentence. She went to find Lily, because she would not vanish on a child the way every adult in Nora's own childhood had vanished on her. She knelt down, the crouch one last time, on the cold, pale stone, and the smell of the morning's stale flour still hung in the kitchen behind them, and she said, "Hey, I have to go away for a while. It's not because of anything you did, you hear me? You did everything right. You always do everything right. This is a grown-up thing, and it is not your fault, not even a little, not even one piece." And Lily, who understood more than anyone gave her credit for, did not cry, which was so much worse than crying. She just held very still, the way she'd held still on the platform, her small fingers cold where they found Nora's, and said, "Are you coming back?" And Nora, who would not lie to a child, said, "I don't know. I want to. I don't know." And that was the worst moment of the entire winter. Worse than the platform. Worse than anything. The holding still child and the honest, terrible, "I don't know." Nora went home in her thin coat. She did not cry on the walk, because she had trained that out of herself a long time ago. She cried when she got inside, with her back against her own door, sliding down it to the floor. And she cried the way Lily had cried on the platform. The quiet kind. The kind you learn when crying loud has stopped working, and there was no one to cross the platform and crouch down and say staying put was the smart thing. There was just Nora, alone, exactly as alone as she had always secretly believed she would always be. Having let herself believe, for one happy week, in a thing that broke on a Thursday. The penthouse, after she left, went back to 71 degrees and silence. Julian moved through the 11 cold rooms like a man pacing a hotel again. The flour stayed in the cupboard, unused, going stale. Lily stops talking at meals. She did not melt down, which everyone except Delphine found reassuring. Delphine knew that a child who has stopped melting down has not gotten better. She has gotten quieter. She has started to hold her breath. And Delphine had watched this family hold its breath for 2 years, and could not bear to watch the smallest of them learn it too. It was Delphine, in the end, who said the thing. She said it to Julian on the 4th grey day, when he came into the kitchen at 7 out of a habit that no longer had a reason, and stood looking at the marble island with no flour on it, the most beautiful slab the man had ever cut, bare again. "You're a fool," Delphine said, not lifting the lid off anything, looking right at him, which from Delphine was an emergency. "I told her not to fall in love with you. I told her you were a closed door.
I was wrong, as it turns out, but not the way I thought. You're not a closed door. You're a man standing in front of an open one, telling everyone it's closed because you're too frightened to walk through it. She set down her cloth on the bare, cold marble. Your wife, God rest her, would be ashamed of you. Not for grieving, for using the grief as a place to hide. Eleanor put flour in this house. That woman put flour back in this house. And you let your mother sweep it out, because you'd rather be safe and miserable than brave and happy. And the worst of it, Julian, the part I cannot forgive, is that your daughter is learning how to do it from you. She's 5. She's already learning to hold her breath. Delphine's voice cracked, once, and steadied. Fix it. You always tell that child if you make a mistake, you fix it. So fix it, or stop saying it to her, because she's listening. Julian stood in his cold kitchen and understood that he had run at the wrong person again. That he had, under fire, reached for the wallet instead of the woman. That he had let his fear wear his mother's voice. That he had taken the one warm thing in 2 years and tried to make it safe by making it small. And in making it small, he had broken it. And that the cost of his cowardice was being paid, right now, by a 5-year-old learning to go quiet. He went to find his mother. This was Beat B, though no one in that house had a name for it. It was simply the morning Julian Vance stopped surviving Vivian and started facing her. She was in her own home, the apartment that was all old furniture and older silences, and she received him with her chin up, ready for a fight she was certain she would win, because she always won, because no one she could not fire had ever told her no. I'm going to ask her to come back, Julian said. Not as staff, not on a contract. I'm going to ask her to stay, the way you ask a person you... He made himself say it, in his mother's cold living room, the hardest room in the world to say it in. The way you ask a person you love. And I'm telling you first, not asking you, because I've spent 40 years asking you, and it's cost me everything that ever mattered, including, very nearly, my own child. Vivian's face did not change. The verdict face, the fortress. And the Ashworth girl, Vivian began. Camilla is a lovely person who deserves a man who is actually free, which I have never been, not since the platform. And you knew that, Mother, which is why you kept inviting her to lunches I didn't agree to. He let that sit. There's no match to arrange. There never was. Stop laying stones on a wall I'm not going to build. Vivian's mouth tightened. She's a waitress, she said. She's the bravest person I've ever met, and she gave my daughter the only warmth this family's produced since we lost Eleanor. And she did it for $1 she didn't have. And she turned down every cent I ever offered her, which is more than I can say for anyone else who's ever entered our lives, including, Mother, some of the suitable ones. He stepped closer. At the gala, with Eleanor's picture, in the lounge when you thought no one was looking. Vivian went rigid. Nora saw you. She didn't tell anyone. She just told me you weren't a verdict. You were sad. She defended you. The woman you tried to buy off and chase away spent her last night in my house defending you to me. Because she's the only person in our entire world who looks at people and sees the frightened thing underneath instead of the money on top. That's who you ran out of our lives. Not a gold digger. The one person who'd have loved you too, if you'd let her. And Vivian Vance, 71 years old, who had not been told no by anyone she could not fire, who had built a fortress in the exact dimensions of her grief, sat down slowly in her old chair and put one hand over her mouth, and the verdict face came apart, and what was under it was just an old woman who had been so afraid of losing another daughter that she had thrown away the closest thing she'd had to one. I don't know how to do this either, Vivian said from behind her hand, the same words her son had said to an empty room weeks before.
The family curse spoken aloud at last. I only know how to protect things by holding them so tightly they... She stopped. Your father used to say I'd squeeze the life out of a stone, trying to keep it safe. Then let go of this one, Julian said, more gently than he had ever spoken to her. Help me get her back. Be brave once, in front of me, so Lily can see how it's done from someone other than the woman we chased away. The reconciliation was not instant, because the script of this family did not allow for instant, and that is the truth the channel knows. Vivian did not transform in a sentence, but she did that morning, the hardest thing she had done in 20 years. She picked up the telephone, and she called her son's lawyer, and she instructed him to dissolve the trust arrangement she had quietly been using as leverage over Julian for a decade. The strings she had kept on the company, the control, all of it, transferred outright to her son, surrendered. The one tangible thing she had, placed down on the table, where it could not be taken back. And then she said she would like, if it was permitted, to apologize to Ms. Ellison herself, in person, in Ms. Ellison's own world, not summoned to a cold living room, because she understood now that summoning was the whole problem. Nora was working the Larkspur lunch when they came, all three of them, on a Tuesday. She saw Lily first, because she always saw the children first. Lily threading between the tables in her plum coat with the determination of a person on a mission. And Nora's heart cracked straight down the middle, and she set down her tray, and she crouched. And Lily ran the last 10 feet, and hit her like a small warm truck, and said, into her neck, "You came back?" Which was wrong. Nora hadn't come back. Lily had come to her. But Nora understood what she meant. That the holding still had ended, that the breath had been let out. And Nora held on and did not care that the whole dining room was watching. Then she saw Vivian, who was standing very straight in the doorway of the slightly shabby bistro in her good coat, profoundly out of place, looking as uncertain as a woman like that ever permits herself to look. And Nora understood that this had cost her something, the coming here, the standing in the place she would once have looked down on. And then she saw Julian, who was not looking uncertain at all, who was looking at her the way he had looked at her behind the black drape at the gala, with no fortress in it, holding, of all things, a small folded square of paper. I rehearsed this, Julian said, crossing to her. And then I threw out everything I rehearsed, because the last time I rehearsed something for you, it was a joke about spoons, and you said it was the worst thing you'd ever heard. Around them, the Larkspur had gone quiet, forks down, the whole room leaning in. So here's the unrehearsed version. I reached for my wallet when I should have reached for you. I've done it twice now, on the platform and in the living room. Both times I tried to pay for the thing instead of standing in front of it, because paying is the only way I knew to hold something without the terror of losing it as a person. And I was wrong. And it cost me you. And it nearly cost me my daughter, who was learning from me how to go quiet. He held out the folded paper. I'm not offering you a contract. I'm not offering you a check. I'm giving you back your $1. Nora took it. It was a single $1, folded into a soft square, gone limp from handling. The exact way hers had been on the platform. The vendor wouldn't take it that night, Julian said. You pressed it on him, and he had to take it to let you keep your dignity. And after you walked off, I bought a coffee I didn't want, just so I could ask him for change. And I asked him for this exact bill back, the soft, folded one, because I'd watched you give away the last thing you had to a child who wasn't yours. And I knew. I think I knew right then, standing on that platform, that I'd just watched the realest thing I would ever see. And I've carried this $1 in my coat every day since that platform, all these weeks, like an idiot, like a man who didn't know what it meant yet. His voice was not steady now, and he let it not be. It means I'd like to stop paying for things and start staying. If you'll have a coward who's trying to stop being one, that's the whole offer. It's worth about $1. The larkspur was silent. Somewhere, Buster had stopped mid-step. Lily was holding Nora's apron with both hands.
Nora looked at the dollar. The dollar that had gone around in a small circle on a cold platform and ended up against everything, here, in a shabby bistro at lunch, having bought nothing and, it turned out, everything. "This is a real dollar lady deal," Nora said, which was the inside joke, which was the answer inside the answer, and she watched it land on him, watched the whole man light up. And she did not say, "I love you," because the subtext mandate of her own heart had always known that the realest things live underneath the words. She just folded her hand around the dollar and around his hand holding it, and said, "The first time anyone in your house treats me like the help, I walk. That offer still stands, for everyone." She looked, deliberately, at Vivienne. Vivienne stepped forward, in a bistro that was beneath her, in front of staff she would once not have seen. The old woman who had never apologized to anyone she could not fire said, with effort, with cost, the verdict face gone for good, "I was wrong about you, Miss Ellison. Profoundly. You saw my granddaughter when I was too frightened to, and you saw me when I'd given you every reason not to bother. I dismantled the hold I had over my son this morning. It's done. It's irrevocable. My lawyer has the papers. I tell you that not to impress you, but so you'll believe I mean this. I would be honored, genuinely honored, if you would consider letting an old fool be part of this child's life alongside you, on your terms, learning your way of doing things, which is plainly better than mine." She paused. "I don't know how to do this, but I would like to learn. From you." And Nora, who had spent her whole life on the wrong side of doors like the Vances, who had aged out and gone hungry and given away her last dollar on a freezing platform to a child who wasn't hers, stood in the middle of the larkspur with that same dollar warm in her hand and a 5-year-old gripping her apron and a reformed dragon apologizing and a billionaire who'd carried a folded bill in his coat through that whole strange winter because he'd known, before he knew anything, that he'd watched the realest thing he'd ever see. Nora stood in the middle of all of it and started, finally, to cry. The loud kind, the good kind, the kind you only let yourself do when staying put has finally brought someone across the platform to you. "Okay," she said, laughing and crying at once, to all three of them, to the whole improbable family of them. "Okay, yes. But you're all eating the lamb. It's the special. And Julian's leaving a normal tip." They stayed for the lamb. The larkspur smelled of rosemary and browned butter and the faint, sweet ghost of syrup that never quite left Nora's clothes. And the winter light came thin and gold through the front windows and lay across the soft old tablecloths. And Vivienne, who had eaten in rooms with chandeliers her whole life, said the lamb was the best thing she'd had in a year, and meant it. And Lily got mint sauce on her chin, and Julian left a normal tip, exactly a normal tip, and wrote on the back of the receipt in his precise hand a single dollar sign and nothing else, and slid it across the worn wood to Nora, who laughed until her ribs hurt. It is a year later, and the 9:42 is, as ever, late. Nora knows this because she is standing on the Carver Street platform on purpose, on a cold, bright evening, with Lily's mittened hand in hers. Because this is a thing they do now, once in a while, on the anniversary of the night it all started. They come to the platform. They buy 2 cocos from the same vendor, who has long since stopped being surprised to see them and now simply makes the cocos and waves off the money, and they have to fight him to make him take it. The same fight every year, the dollar going around its small circle. Lily is 6 now and reads the arrival board herself and reports the delays with great authority. Julian comes up the stairs, not running this time, never running this time, walking up out of the dark with his coat open and his face the opposite of grey, finding them exactly where he knew they would be. Because the whole point, the only point, is that now there is always someone who knows where to find you. The dollar he gave her is not in his coat anymore. It hangs framed in the warm kitchen at home, above the marble island that the man cried when he cut. The marble island that has flour on it again, every single day, because Lily has gotten very good at pancakes and is teaching her grandmother, who is genuinely terrible at it, and genuinely delighted to be, and because the house, at last, is exactly as warm as it pretends to be. He carries a different dollar now, a fresh one, folded soft from handling, because some nights, on this platform, there is always a vendor to overpay. "You're late," Lily informs her father, who is not late, who is precisely on time, who has been on time every evening for a year. "The 9:42's later," Julian says. "The 9:42 is always later," says Nora. "It's the one reliable thing in this city," they say together, which is the inside joke, which is the whole story. Two people who learned that the most important thing a person can do, when someone they love is lost and cold and waiting, is to be the one who crosses the platform, crouches down, and chooses, with whatever they have, even if it's only a single, soft, folded dollar, to stay. The train comes. They let it go. They are not going anywhere. They drink their cocoa in the cold, bright dark, the three of them, and the dollar that bought everything. And they go home, where the kitchen is warm, where the flour is out, where the door is open, and no one, anymore, is pretending that it's closed.